Carol Costello. I hesitate showing you the list of questions because you'll think you'll be here overnight, but I promise you, you won't. But thank you so much for talking with me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I love your podcast. It's so positive, and I think it's so important for people to understand and love journalism today. So, thank you.
Well, let's start from the very beginning. Where did you grow up and what was your childhood like?
Oh, pretty typical middle class. So, I grew up in Canton, Ohio, where football began. You know, that's where the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I'm a big football fan.
I'm from Michigan, so Midwest girlies.
Oh, Oh, you're from Michigan.
Sorry.
I know. I do love the Detroit Lions, though. Long
Okay,
story, so
good,
that's
good, good.
cool. Okay, so, but I grew up in Canton, Ohio, and I spent my high school years in Minerva, Ohio, which is a very, very tiny, tiny little rural city south of Ohio. And my dad was a factory worker, and my mom was a secretary, and we had a pretty good, uneventful middle class kind of life. I went to Kent State University in Ohio and got my degree in journalism. And then it was off to the races.
Did you always know that you wanted to be a journalist, even from a young age?
12. I was 12.
Okay.
I saw Jessica Savage. Probably no one remembers her because she was way back in the day, but she was one of the first women on network television, and she used to do
Yes.
news breaks, right? And I just thought she was just so amazing. I thought, wow, here's someone who is smart and is imparting important information and has been all over the world. And it just, I don't know what it was about her, but it hooked me. And I've never wanted to be anything else but a journalist from that point on.
And the news industry is a male dominated field, but I bet even more so when you were starting out. Did you experience that when you first started your career?
Oh, yes, it was totally male dominated. I started working professionally in 1983, so that was a really long time ago. And that was back in the days when, there were a lot of men in the newsroom and they all smoked and there was cigarette ashes everywhere and Coke cans and they used those for ashtrays and it was disgusting and foul and misogyny was the norm, although I probably didn't understand that at the time. But yes, it was incredibly male dominated and very difficult to get paid what you deserved as a woman or get equal pay with a man doing the same job in the newsroom.
And what was your first job in news professionally?
Um, I was a reporter slash weather girl. And when I say weather girl, I mean weather girl because I was put in that position. Oh, I was a traffic reporter too on the radio because I had to do all three.
Of
Um,
course.
yeah. But I was a weather girl because I was not a meteorologist. I knew nothing about cold fronts and high whatever. And I wasn't interested in that, quite frankly. But I was cute enough, and they decided that it would be a good idea for me to be the weather girl and also to cover crime. So I was started my career as a crime reporter slash weather girl slash traffic reporter.
Well, and I was going to ask, as a woman in this industry at that time, do you feel like you were relegated to fluff stories or easy stories because you were a woman?
Oh, definitely, definitely. Actually, one of my favorite stories that I think illustrates the misogyny back in the day is this. I was working in Columbus, Ohio, which is a pretty big television market, right? I think it's 64th or something like that. And the news director at the time had roles for each reporter, like personalities he wanted us to fit into. There was the good girl, and that was the weather person at the time. And she was blonde and cute and sexy, but not too sexy, right? She was sort of the girl next door. That was her persona. There was the librarian who did all the economic stories because, she sort of had that look, according to this news director. And I was the girl that you wouldn't bring home to introduce to your mother because I
Wow.
was sort of the bad girl. And I was assigned to be a crime reporter. And the more dangerous the background could look in my live reports, the better, because then I would fit into that mold better. And at the time, I mean, I didn't even realize it was sexist. I really didn't because it's kind of the role I enjoyed, because I like that little edge danger. I really enjoy crime reporting. I really enjoyed establishing sources within police departments and getting to do really cool stuff, which I did. So I guess I just sort of dismissed that part of it and didn't. I know it's just so strange to think back on it now to my younger self and how naive I was about certain things.
How long were you at your first market and where did you go next?
My first job was at WAKR TV 23 in Akron, Ohio. I was there for about 3 years. Actually, I was fired from that job.
Really?
Um,
Talk about that.
so I think I was 23, maybe, or 24. I was very young. And I wanted to be the anchor of the newscast.
And this was when you were also a reporter slash
Weather
traffic
girl
anchor
slash
slash
traffic
weather
report,
girl
right?
slash
Right.
everything.
And they would let me anchor the weekend news sometimes because I was actually very popular in that market.
Mhm.
So I remember I I wanted to be the anchor of the news because I guess I was a little arrogant at 24 and I thought it was really great and I thought I deserved the job. So I put together a tape.
You shoot your shot.
Gotta go for it, right? So I
Hmm.
put together a tape. I had all my best stuff on it. It took me like weeks to put it together because you know how nerve-wracking that is. It's like, what do I put on it? Like, how much do I show? And all that. So I went up to the general manager's office with my tape, and the general manager was probably a man in his 50s at the time, and I'm 22, maybe 23. And there was a one monitor in his office, or it was a tape machine back in those days, right? And he was sitting in a chair in front of that tape machine, and I was standing beside him. And he goes, "Do you want to sit down to watch it?" I said, "No, no, no, no. I'm way too nervous. I'm just going to stand here, and I'll just go over and turn." He goes, "No, no, no, no. I'm serious. Do you want to sit down?" And I'm like, mm-mm. And he places his hands on either side of my hips, and he sat me on his lap. And I'm sitting there for the longest time thinking, this is so weird, and I don't want to get fired, and I really want this job and this promotion, and I'm sitting on this man's lap, and I certainly don't want to do that. And he finally says, "Are you comfortable?" And I said, "I don't really think I should be sitting here." And he said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "I'm positive." And I got up, ejected the tape, and went downstairs and promptly went into another room in the newsroom where I could find some and cried. I just cried. And it wasn't long after that before I was fired. And I just remember how embarrassed I was because I'd have to tell my mom. I didn't tell her what happened. I didn't tell anybody what happened. But I was just so ashamed of being fired. That's what I was ashamed of.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And does this take you back to even just 10 years ago when the whole Me Too movement and there were a lot of more things coming out about this? Take you back there to that moment?
It did. And I was so proud of the women who were courageous enough to speak out. But I remember I wrote an op-ed for CNN at the time. And I said, the backlash is going to set in. I know the backlash is going to set in because I did think that movement went a little bit too far, right? And I knew it would happen, and it did. And we're suffering the backlash right now, I think. I don't regret that that happened or blame any woman for coming forward to share their truth, but the backlash always sets in, and somehow, whoever controls that movement, of which I don't think there was one person, um, has to think about that before it happens.
So you got out of there, and where did you head next? Did it take you some time to get a new job, or was it pretty quick?
Well, it seemed like forever. I worked in radio for a time, and then I went to Toledo, Ohio, and worked at a television station there, and for about 3 or 4 months. And then I went on to Columbus, Ohio, and I really did enjoy that job, even though I had to like portray the bad girl you would never want to bring home to meet your mother.
And did you do a lot of crime at that station too then?
I did. I was the crime reporter. I was a crime reporter for a long time. I enjoyed that, and then it morphed into investigative reporting when I hit the Washington D.C. market.
And how long did it take you to go from Ohio to Washington, D.C.?
I think that my average was like 3 years in one place and I was gone. So Toledo was 3 months. Columbus was 3 or 4 years. And then after that, I went to Baltimore and that was 3 years. And then I hit Washington and I stayed there for 5 years. And then I went to CNN.
What was it like working in Washington, D.C.? Can you talk to me about that?
Ah, it's one of my favorite jobs. I loved working in Washington, D.C. So I worked at Channel 7, WJLA, and I think that Washington, D.C. is a very smart city. I think it's the most educated city in America. And there's just so many smart people there. And, there are big universities. There's the political front. And I started to become involved in politics because you couldn't really cover local news without covering politics too, because so many federal workers lived in Washington, D.C. Um, I got to be an investigative reporter there. I loved the city. Washington, D.C. is beautiful. And I know a lot of people think it's a cesspool because of politics, but um, I loved it. It's a beautiful city. It has beautiful park system. Um, and I met my husband there. So maybe that's really it. I don't know.
And you've been with your husband for now more than 20 years, right?
We're going to hit 22 years in July. Yeah, it's been a long time.
Congratulations.
Oh,
I mean,
thank
that
you.
that's hard in itself, having that long of a relationship and being in an industry like this.
Well, you know what's really intriguing to me? I never thought I could have it all. Um, I admire women who are in the business and have children and raise children and then do a job that's all consuming. I admire them. I never thought that I could do that. So I didn't get married until I was 42. And for 15 years of our marriage, we did not live together. He was in the academe and he held high positions at universities, and I just wanted to do my career, my thing. And he was understanding enough, and we're true partners. I think he was understanding enough to agree to do that, and not many men of my generation would have agreed to that. So I am a lucky, lucky woman.
Yeah, two very independent and working professionals. That can be difficult.
It's to me, it is so hard, but for us, it worked because we're both workaholics. So we spend the bulk of our time at work. We don't have children, which makes it a lot easier. I think it would be totally different if we had children. And and then when he got a job in Los Angeles, I was working in New York City, and it was just too much. So I figured I've been in broadcasting for 35 years. I think it's time. So I came to Los Angeles.
You should have seen my daughter yesterday during a Zoom call. She walked in the background and had red lipstick all over her face. I couldn't even see any portion of her face. It was just completely red. And I said, guys, this is what I have to deal with right now. Be right back. And I just spent about 10 minutes scrubbing her face off. And I'm like, this is chaos, utter chaos.
It's so cute. I love that though. That's so cute.
Cute, but chaos. Total chaos all the time.
I admire you. I do. That's tough. It's just tough. It's just tough. I always thought that, well, way back in the day, I didn't ever wanted to get married. That wasn't my thing. But to be a single parent, um, and a woman having a baby out of wedlock was not something that you did if you wanted to stay on television. So I just, I never had children. And I don't really regret it, but I do think about it sometimes whether, if I would have had the courage to be a single mother back in the day. And I don't know. I don't know that I could have. I don't know. I could do it now, but not then.
Speaking of your time in Washington, D.C., Were you in Washington, D.C. when September 11th happened? And what do you remember about that day?
Well, I did the morning news at WGLA. I was the morning anchor, and Good Morning America was on. And, we did those news breaks within Good Morning America. So I was
Mm-hmm.
sitting there with the meteorologist, who was one of my very good friends. Um, and we were watching Good Morning America, and the meteorologist, we saw the first plane hit. Um, and she said, that just does not look right. It's got to be something weird. And I'm like, no, it's just probably a terrible accident. I don't know. And of course, she was right. So, because it was Washington, D.C., and there was that other plane out there, and everybody thought it was headed toward Washington, D.C., and it was going to hit the White House. And that's our market, our local market. And
Right.
people were panicking. So, I think I was on the air for 22 hours.
Wow.
Yeah, we just went. I remember there was a phone on the set behind us, and my husband kept calling me. He was in Fairfield, Connecticut at the time. And I would answer it when I could get a break, and he would always say, "Why are you still on the air? Why aren't you at home? Aren't you in danger?" And I'm like, "Honey, it's my job. I can't, this is my job. I have to give people what information that I can so that they can make good decisions about their own safety. It's not about me anymore." But he kept calling me. So that's what I clearly remember about that day was his fear, the fear in his voice. And then my thinking, are you crazy? I got to stay on the air.
Yeah. What always sticks with me is it's not just a story, it's people's stories. You have the responsibility to tell the people's stories for so many. Some people that are going through the absolute worst day of their entire life.
You're right. And I think that I wish more people would realize that about journalists. We are caring people. Most of us do this because we want to make the world a better place, not because we want to control things or tell lies or sensationalize. It's really about that sense of responsibility to tell people information that they need to know so they can live their lives better.
When did CNN call?
Well, in Washington, and I really liked my job because I had a good gig. The investigative unit had its own photographer, so I had my own photographer and producer, and I was the morning anchor, and life was good. And my husband was working. Well, he wasn't my husband then; he was my boyfriend. He was working at Georgetown because he was a professor and the dean of science there, and he was offered a job in Fairfield, Connecticut. And we had a discussion, and he said, "I have to take this job." I said, "I understand, but I'm not going to go with you because you're my boyfriend. If you were my husband, I'm not going to give up my career for you."
If you put a ring on it.
That's right, exactly. But he wasn't going to do that at that time. So he goes off to Fairfield, and it was very painful. So all of a sudden, Washington really wasn't so fun for me anymore. So I was trying to figure out what to do, and my agent called, and I said, I've always wanted to work for CNN because it covers everything. I can learn a lot about a lot of stuff. Really smart people there, and why don't we just explore? And so we did, and I got a job there. It was it was truly amazing. That was one of the happiest days of my life. I didn't get to go to Fairfield, but I went to Atlanta, and my boyfriend at the time, and I made it work.
You said it was one of the happiest days of your life. Can you tell me about that phone call and getting that job?
I never thought that seeing, for some reason, you know, I'm the kind of person who didn't really, I just sort of let things happen. Like those 3 years thing, and then this other job came along, and I'm like, okay, I'll go do it. So I wasn't really choosy about the jobs that I accepted. And this was the one time that I got a job that I really, really wanted. And I just felt like I had made it, which is silly because I had a great job and I was doing just fine. And local news is so important. But I really felt like this is my final step up. I finally did it. I remember I called my mom. That was the first person I called, not my boyfriend, my mom. And she couldn't believe it either. So the whole conversation was, can you believe I got a job at CNN? Oh my God, are you sure that they said yes? Really, mom? Yes. It was a great day.
Aw, I love that. What was your day to day schedule like at CNN? I'm so curious.
Oh, oh my God. Well, when I first got there, I was the early morning anchor. So I anchored from 5 to 7 a.m. So I got into work at 2:30. Um,
I've done that shift.
it's a terrible shit. It's really awful. But the people I worked with were amazing. So this was experimental for CNN at the time because it was their first early morning show. So my executive producer was like 25 years old or 26 because no one else wanted the job.
Hmm.
Brian Bell. He's still at CNN. He's a great guy. And so it was really kind of up to us to craft what that show looked like, which was really great because the management really wasn't paying any attention to it because it was new and they never expected anybody to watch it. So
Did you like that in a way, though, because you were jumping into such a big network that you're like, well, maybe getting my feet wet this early in the morning?
I know. Well, it was a lot less stressful, you're right, because the focus wasn't, constantly on me and the ratings, right? So we crafted what we thought was a fantastic show. But the schedule was grueling. So really, you started preparing the night before. So we would have a call at 6 p.m. and we would go over what we saw in the news that day. So you would be watching news all day from everywhere. You would be calling the bureau chiefs all around the world to figure out what they were covering and what might be interesting to people in the morning. Um, and you didn't really have access to all the correspondence at CNN because it was so early in the morning. So you would have to um, be creative. So you would have to say, you know what? Because Dana Bash was a producer at the time for, I think, John King, who eventually became her husband, and now she's divorced from him. But anyway, I digress. But she was a producer at the time, and she was wickedly smart. So I remember we should use Dana. Dana would be great. So I think that was one of the first shows where Dana appeared on air as a reporter was at daybreak. So there were a lot of things to figure out. So you ended up really working all day and all night. You slept for about, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours. And then you got up and did it all again. And then you come in at 2:30 in the morning. We had overnight writers. So I really am a control freak and always have written my own stories. The writers were great, but I felt the need to go in and just look at the stories and write what I could and rewrite what I needed to, right? And then some things I just had to let go of because I didn't have time.
What do you think makes a great anchor?
I think what makes a great anchor is knowing what people want to know, saying out loud what people are thinking, having that innate ability to know that. That's what makes a great anchor.
That
And you
takes
have to be
practice too.
It takes practice, and as a news director, a wise news director once told me, you will never be a good reporter or anchor until you experience certain things, until you own a house, until you have a child, until someone close to you dies, until you experience hardship in your life. You will never be great. And he told me this when I was in my 20s. And I think he's right about that.
Yeah, he did have something to say about that because there is that relatability factor that it's that X factor that you just don't have until you experience it firsthand.
Absolutely. So, and I think that some people have an unusual ability to connect with people, and it's an intangible that I think you have or you don't, and that also makes a great anchor and communicator.
Speaking of which, what do you think makes a great interviewer? Because that's a skill as well.
Listening, curiosity, putting aside what you think about certain things and opening your mind to what someone is telling you. That makes a great interview, or that and the question why.
The question why? Yeah, you've done a million interviews too, so you know firsthand. You've interviewed anybody and everybody. Is there a specific interview that you've done that really just sticks out to you?
Oh, that's tough. Because I have interviewed some amazing people. Um, I actually think Hillary Clinton, but this was a long time ago. This was when Bill Clinton was running for president, and she was the first lady who was outwardly feminist. So she was going through it, right? And I was working in Columbus, Ohio at the time. I had no real experience with covering politics, but I knew all this stuff that was out there, right? And I remember sitting down with her, and I wanted to be tough too, because as a young reporter, you always want to prove you have chops, which is totally wrong. Please don't do that because that's stupid. Just be a human.
Right.
But I remember how nervous I was sitting down across from her, and she was really smart and had it together. Nothing could shake her. Nothing I could say could shake her. And I remember thinking, wow, this is some woman. Um, it was difficult to know who exactly she was because there was this veneer that I could not break through. So, for all of those reasons, I didn't think my interview was great with her, which is a weird one to point out, right? But I learned a lot from that interview about what to do and what not to do, and how to break through and how not to break through, and why sometimes not breaking through tells you more about a person than breaking through, if that
Sometimes you
makes
learn
sense.
more from your failures than your successes, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, what did you
Absolutely.
learn during that interview? I'm curious.
Um, I learned that being tough outwardly is not a good game plan. Um, I think that natural curiosity and charm, you can get to the root of the matter much quicker. That's what I learned. Right.
Interesting.
Hmm.
And you've interviewed multiple presidents and multiple inaugurations. Is there a president that just sticks out to you that you've interviewed? I have to know.
These are such, see, the silly stories have stuck with me because they were so insane. So, Jimmy Carter, right? I was really young because all these more interesting things happened to me in local markets because it's just so much more community oriented and warmer
Right.
than the national news is. So this is, I think, why these incidences stick out to me. So Jimmy Carter. So my photographer at the time, Jimmy Carter was, I think, going around the world and overseeing elections to make sure democracy was happening. This was when he was out of office, but he was still like a former president of the United States.
Right.
And I really wanted to get a one-on-one interview with him because, of course, that would be cool. And that's your goal as a reporter. So I could ask him about specifics to my community. So the boring meeting that he was a press conference he was at was over. And the photographer looked at me and he goes, you know what? Let's run after Jimmy Carter. And, I get famous people to record answering machine messages for my answering machine. And I'm going to ask Jimmy Carter. I'm like, no, you're not. That is so unprofessional. And like, no, you're not. I'm going to get my one on one and I'm going to ask him important questions. And he goes, no, I'm really going to do it. I said, you're going to get fired. So I remember we're running down the street after Jimmy Carter, who's surrounded by Secret Service members, running, running, running. Jimmy Carter looks at me and I go, oh, President Carter, I was just wondering if you would give me a one-on-one interview. And he goes, I noticed you in the press conference. You seemed so intrigued by what I was saying. And then my photographer breaks in and says, President Carter, I collect famous voices for my answering machine. And the Secret Service is like, oh my God, these are crazy people. And they start like pushing us away. And he goes, President Carter, I just wondered if you would like record something of my answer. And Jimmy Carter says, no, wait a minute. No, wait a minute. I've never done anything like that. He goes, what would you want me to say? And my photographer goes, just say, hi, I'm President. I'm Jimmy Carter, former President of the United States. Brad cannot come to the phone right now. Honest to God, I was
I mean, he had
dying.
balls. I
Oh
give
my
him
God.
credit.
He did. He was like, oh, I was dying of embarrassment. But Jimmy Carter did it. He did it. And then he gave me my one on one. And the next day, the Columbus Dispatch did a story on it. And what do you think made the paper?
Oh, I can only guess.
I was so down. Exactly. That is my favorite memory of interviewing a president.
That is so funny. Oh my goodness. Oh, what a day. But I mean, those are the type of things you remember.
I know I would never suggest that. Don't ever do that because it's so unprofessional, but that actually did happen. I
Wow.
can't believe it did, but it did. You know, I interviewed him years later when he won the Nobel Prize. I did not bring that incident up.
You're like, we'll leave that one be.
Exactly.
Switching gears to live shots, because you've probably done hundreds of live shots in your career, and that is a talent in itself. I still work on live shots to this day. I mean, those that can really command that talent, kudos. What are some tips that you would give in doing live shots? Do you prepare actual stand-ups? Do you just bullet point? Like, what is your take on live shots?
Well, you know what? When I was a really young reporter, I used to write them out in longhand because when I write, I find I remember better than, typing into my
Me
phone or
too.
anything like that. Um, but I think when you try to memorize, like I got stuck one day and froze. I couldn't remember what the next line was. So after that, I never did that again. I never wrote anything down, but I would write certain facts down. I don't think they were bullet points. They're more like, I need to remember this key fact because I need to be accurate. So I would do that. But eventually, I loved live shots. I thought that was my best talent. And that's really why I got hired at CNN because in the interview process, um, they wanted to know your live capability. So they did this fake newscast, and I was sitting on the set reading from the prompter, and in my ear, a producer said, "There's a plane with smoke coming out the back circling O'Hare Airport in Chicago. Talk about it." Right? So, like, I'm in Atlanta sitting in a studio, um, and I was able to dance for like 5 minutes about a plane incident that wasn't really happening. But it was acquired knowledge, right? So I had enough acquired knowledge at that time that I could actually do that and make it sound believable. I think that that really is the secret to good live reporting is acquired knowledge.
Almost like learn the facts so you can forget them. Because if
Yeah.
you're that prepared, you don't need to worry about it. You're not constantly just overthinking.
Right. And sometimes it's enough just to be a person and to tell me what you're observing and what you're feeling. I think that's fine. I think that young reporters sometimes forget that. Like facts do matter, and it's you have to be accurate. That's of utmost importance. But also the feel of something is important. If you're covering a fire and you smell smoke in the air, say that. If it's affecting your eyes and your eyes are watering, say it. Like just be a person and yourself. I think that's the other tip I would have. You have to feel comfortable in who you are and that you belong in front of a camera talking about this thing. You have to have like utmost confidence in yourself and who you are. And that makes it a lot easier to stand there and impart information.
1000%. Now, you are in Los Angeles. You left New York City after how many years were you in New York City?
I think 5 years.
5 years. Do you miss it?
Oh, yeah, I love New York. I really did. That was so. I remember, like, I used to walk to work in the morning because the CNN bureau was at Columbus Circle, and I didn't live far from there. And I'd walk in and I'd pass Times Square and all the light, and I couldn't believe this person from Minerva, Ohio, was in New York City working at CNN. I just felt so fortunate, and I just can't describe. Every morning I felt the same way. Every single morning. It was just amazing to me. I had such a good time.
And now we're neighbors in Los Angeles.
I know. Who knew?
You work at Loyola Marymount University in the journalism department, and you're also an ambassador, right?
Hmm. Yes.
Teaching students today, you are teaching the next generation of journalists. What is that like, and what are you trying to teach that next generation? Because it is so different today than it was even when you started.
So different. I think that it's a rare student who can write an article that is controversial and not care about what people say on social media. That to me is the biggest problem. Social media. And I'll say to students, why do you read it? Why do you care? You don't know that person. Who cares? That's some rando person out there. But young people really do care what's said about them online. I think that that's been the most difficult hurdle for me as an instructor. The other thing I really care about is unbiased reporting because I don't think people know what journalism is any longer. So I went out and raised money and created a program called Project Citizen. I thought it was important to take my journalism students out of Southern California and the bubble we live in and send them to Kansas, right? Arizona, even, right? To get them out of that bubble so that they could really understand what's happening in the world because that's what journalists are supposed to be all about.
Yeah.
So I think that it is still difficult to, you know, teach students how to write truly unbiased articles or nonpartisan articles, especially in this climate that we live in right now. But I do think it's important to get students out of the bubble and out into the country so that they can better understand what people are feeling. But that's been difficult because some students just don't want to go. They don't want to talk to those people because it's hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to sit down and listen to somebody who's totally antithetical to what you think, right? It's hard. But that's a job. It's your job as a journalist to listen and then to come back and put it all together for me, the reader, viewer, and tell me what it means, right? So those are the challenges I think um, that exist today for people who teach journalism.
Before I let you go, looking back at your journey over the last couple of decades doing this, what have you learned about yourself as a journalist?
I am tough as nails. I can handle anything. That's what I learned about myself. It took me a long time to arrive at that conclusion, but I am sure I can handle anything. Um, I can cover any kind of story. I can learn about any kind of topic. I can ask questions of any kind of person. And I feel comfortable doing that. And I wish that I could tell my younger self that, you know what, ain't that hard. It's not rocket science. It's just being a human being and being curious and using your brain.
I love that. Before I let you go, I do have the quick fires though.
Okay.
Fill in the blank. If I weren't a journalist, I would be.
Gosh, an archaeologist.
Really?
Yeah, I think
Why
that
is
would be
that?
fascinating. Oh, I just think history is fascinating and the way people lived back in the day, and to discover something new about what they live, about how they lived. I think that would be amazing. I don't know, a dig probably is tedious, but to me, it's romanticized in my brain. I think that would be so fun to do.
Do you ever go to the tar pits?
Yes,
Yeah.
so cool.
Your coffee order.
Um, a triple latte with 2% milk.
Okay. Love it. Your favorite travel destination?
Oh, that's hard. The Amalfi Coast. It's so
I've never
beautiful.
been.
Oh, you must go. It's so beautiful.
Your favorite restaurant? I'm so curious about this one.
I like the Upper West in Santa Monica. It's sort of hidden away in a weird part of Santa Monica, but the people in there are so friendly and wonderful, and the food's great.
That place is amazing. I've been multiple times. I love it.
Oh, yay!
Something people often get wrong about you.
I'm extroverted. I am way shy introvert.
Really?
Like, I do not like being the center of attention. I do not like large parties. Like, I am a true introvert.
I'm pretty introverted too. People don't know that about me, but I think a lot of journalists are actually, if you get to talking to them.
Do you think it's because we're good listeners? That what makes I don't.
That could be it. But that's funny because that's like the things when you're an introvert, you know those things when you had to go around the room and talk about yourself, which I hated that. Like please never do that. Guys, like teachers, nobody wants to do that. And the whole time you're not listening to what their favorite color is or where they grew up. You're thinking about what am I going to say that doesn't make me sound like a moron?
It's so true. That is so true.
Maybe that's the introvert in us. I don't know.
I don't know. I can so relate.
Even today on Zoom calls, they'll do that. And I'm like, please, my heart can't handle this anymore.
I know. I know. I've had Zoom calls where they'll ask like, "What was your favorite moment today?" And it's like, I don't care. I don't.
So good. The last movie, TV show, or book you watched and loved?
Oh, The White Lotus. That was great. I really enjoyed that.
The best.
Yeah, especially the three women in their friendship, because I could relate.
Totally. I won't do any of the voices of, well, Piper, no. Okay. All right. I had to. I just had to.
I love that.
We have a street in Westchester called Piper, and now that's ingrained in my brain. Every time I drive past it, I'm like, Piper, no. I'm like, it's never leaving. It's never leaving my
It's
brain.
awesome.
A snapshot of an ordinary, everyday moment that gives you true joy.
Oh gosh, taking my dog for a hike and the way his face looks when he knows he's going to jump in the car and go, that's my one of my happiest moments.
Oh,
Isn't that
what's your dog's
crazy?
name?
Jackson. He's a very
Oh,
beautiful lab.
oh, I have a black lab
Oh,
too.
see, they have happy faces.
Yeah. If you could switch lives with one person for a day, who would it be?
I think that this is a really difficult one because every person has their challenges. And would I want to take on those challenges? No.
But you could take them on for
Maybe,
24 hours, right?
okay, so the President of the United States, I clean up that quick.
Interesting.
We'll just leave it at that. Right? I know.
One thing you're deeply grateful for right now.
My husband, I love that man. He's such a good man. I am eternally grateful that I have the type of husband that I do, who lets me be me and is loyal to a fault and thinks I can do anything. Marry that guy if you find that guy.
I have that guy. I have a
Oh,
good
yeah.
guy.
Right? Oh, it's the
We're
best.
lucky.
Hmm.
If you could go back in time to when you first started your career, what piece of advice would you give yourself? Last question.
I think I would be more aggressive at getting better jobs. Because, like I said, I just sort of like went with it. Um, your agent would call and they'd say, "Oh, yeah, this job," and then I wish I would have been much more aggressive about getting the job I wanted, and not about getting just the job that came along.
Says the woman at CNN.
I know it's so weird, but it took me a long time to get there. Maybe I could have gotten there earlier. I don't know.
Carol, this has been fantastic. Thank you so, so, so much for coming on and talking with me. I really do appreciate your time.
Oh, it's fun. And thank you for doing this podcast. I'm a podcaster too now, so I know how difficult that is.
Please
And
talk about that. Talk about your podcast and where people can follow you.
well, I do true crime because, I've always covered crime as a reporter, so I figured why not? And I'm on series two. It's called The God Hook, The Ohio Craigslist Killers. And it's about essentially a religious con man who becomes a serial killer and how religion plays into every part of our criminal justice system in ways you just do not expect. And CarolCostelloPresents.com is my website. And seriously, it is an amazing story. It's just crazy insane. But I hope that people will learn from it and then learn that, there are heroes out there who are imperfect people, but we so need them.
There's the hook.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This was amazing.